Do you think that the literature mirrors the history of life before and now?
Yes.
Yes, right? Mirrors how life before and how it used to be right now. And actually, the literature has three models, as was said earlier: the language model, cultural model, and personal model. That can help you making you the you. You have making your own story in life. Now, are you ready for the process of teaching literature?
Not yet.
Not yet. Not yet. So you're not ready. But if you're not ready, I'll be asking you more questions so that it can help you understand what is the process in teaching literature. Okay? Now the question is, what do you look at when you analyze a survey? I'll give you 3 seconds to analyze the question. That will be the first one. What do you look at when you analyze a certain book? From our previous topic, they said that in the previous topic, when you're looking at the book, interpersonal growth is, we call that, the appropriateness of the book. If it's interesting and it is literary, of course. Now, I'll ask you again, what do you look at when you analyze a certain book? Take a survey.
For me, the cover page, the character is the author's.
When you said that the cover page, if it's for Floyd, if it's aesthetically pleasing to the eyes, it is, it could be a good book. Now, where is your hand is family? Morals. It's about the contents. Sir Justin.
In addition on what Mr. Floyd said, maybe just by the title itself, it makes the book parang catchy. Tapos, maybe for me, the unique thing is what makes the book.
What makes a book? Justin said that a book is good when it has a good title. If the title can catch the audience. It catches the audience eyes, of course. And lastly, Sir Sean, you're raising your hand.
Sure, when we analyze a certain book, we actually look at these elements.
Not on the content.
Yes, sir.
Right. Now, last question to the first person. In your own opinion, what makes a book good? Earlier it was said if it's aesthetically pleasing. Can you add that more? Sir Calvin?
It reflects life.
It reflects life. Because it's literature.
Reflects life.
Reflects life. First, it's because it's literature. Now, proceeding to, let's proceed. What is approach to literature? Approaches to teaching literature. Teacher use different approaches in teaching literature. Now, approaches help personally and emotionally, which can help enjoy pleasure and understand themselves and the world around them. Approaches to teaching literature are the techniques. It is a framework. Next slide. It is a framework that the teacher used in teaching literature. And an approach to teaching describes the nature, how knowledge is acquired, and the conditions that promote language acquisition. Now, let's go. What is the importance of these approaches in literature? Ma'am.
Alright, so before we move to the importance, by the way, I'm teacher Garcia. You can call me teacher Meyer, teacher Seth. It's all up to you. So I have a word different. So can someone decode these words?
Literature approaches.
Yes, that is.
I approve.
So that is the literature. Alright, so that word is literature approaches. So what do we mean by literature approaches? Can someone read?
Video ate para di ka mahirapan.
Sabi niya.
Approaches set of principles, beliefs, or ideas about the nature of learning, Which is translated into the class.
Thank you so much. Literature approach is a way of looking at teaching and learning, and it is also a theoretical view of what language is. And now let's move to the important. So there are three bullets we have. We have three bullets here. So can someone read the first bullet? Please. Mr. Gababat. Can you please read?
Importance. It is acquainted with variety of approaches, techniques, and activities.
Okay, thank you for reading. So once a learner has an idea or knowledge of literature approaches, the learner can have her or his or her own techniques or activities or styles on how he or she can understand the meaning of the word in a text. So that is one of the importance. Next, if someone reads. Stimulate and develop students' interest. Thank you so much. So can you explain this more? This one around understanding. Okay, so the importance of literary approach is that it stimulates and develops students' interest in a way that through these approaches, we get to engage our students better, we get to get their attention. That is actually true. And in addition to that statement, when learners stimulate and develop their interest in a certain literature piece, they will actually have a broader understanding of themselves and the world around them. And also the personal and emotional gain will give them or will offer them enjoyment. And third bullet, please, can someone read? Mr. Pascual, can you please read the third bullet? Okay, so knowledge of literature, using literature approaches. So since literature can be employed as a tool to promote efficiency, to promote literacy and proficiency in language, learners will have an awareness of what is the value and pleasure of reading literature works. And also there are many other approaches that can be employed to teaching literature. We can remember that from the previous page. Okay, since you already have a glimpse of it, we can remember it like this.
Okay. Ano tayo pag ganito?
LPMS. So can someone guess? So the first word would be a language-based approach, paraphrastic approach, moral philosophical approach, and stylistic approach. So these are the approaches to literature. And to further understand it more, my groupmates will also explain it. Let us all welcome Mr. Elsie.
Thank you, Teacher Mai, for introducing the different kinds of approaches in teaching literature. So, again, for the first approach, we have language-based approach. So, as Ma'am Eliza discussing well, so we have the simple plan actually, but thankfully, I was able to modify my short discussion about this approach. So, the language-based approach. Alright, so, the language-based approach, or LBA. So since Ma'am Eliza already introduced the language-based model, so in approach we have I want you to remember that in approach it always appointed that the word approach is equal to how. So how the teacher would employ and apply this approach in a classroom to teach literature. So of course I prepared these concepts. The purpose of learning. The purpose of teacher. The role of teacher rather.
May section yun. May section yun. Parang bulong.
The role of the students, of course.
Naririnig pala.
And we cannot actually say that we have successfully made this approach or applied this approach in a class without activities. Alright? So
activities.
that the teacher may apply. So language-based approach as discussed a while ago. So let me just give some key concept about language-based approach. So it enhances the learner's vocabulary as mentioned, and as the name suggests, language-based. Of course, the targeted language, which is English, would actually the learners would benefit this approach by enhancing their knowledge by focusing on the grammar, lexical, and learning categories. So language-based approach. So what actually the purpose of the learning? So in this approach, language-based approach is equal to interest. So you will know later on is equal to interest. So language-based approach enhances the interest of the learners because there are actually variety of activities that the teacher may apply or may conduct in the classroom in order for his or her learner. The teacher would conduct a variety of activities to enhance the learning of his or her students or learners. And the purpose of learning. The purpose of learning. So as I said, it enhances their interest. Aside from interest, their enjoyment of the literature, and of course, they can build a connection. What are these connections? Their connection to the plot, the characters of the story, or as well as the themes. And these actually can change their perspective towards the literature that they are studying. So next, the role of the teacher. So as mentioned by Ms. Eliza, what again is the LBA? Is it teacher centered or student centered? Because it is student centered because the role of the teacher is not to solely discuss. Imparting knowledge, like talking and talking and talking, but the teacher's role is to facilitate. When you say the facilitate, again, facilitate is to assess, diba? Assist and serve as a guide. The role of the teacher in this approach is a facilitator, and it offers a choice of text that he or she will ask his or her students to interpret. So from being a passive observer, the teacher must plan and prepare students to involve collaboration. We can testify a collaboration concept later on in the activities part. So next, the role of the students. So the role of the student, as I said, as they connect themselves to the character, the plot, or even the themes, they would create their own. Opinions and interpretation of the text or of the literature itself. And lastly, the activities. So there are several activities that has mentioned, but let me just give some of the activities that the teacher may conduct. Yes. First, we have creative writing, writing a summary of the literary text that they are studying. An example of it, jumbled sentence maybe, and jumbled sentence and creating an ending. So, creating an ending. Do you have any idea what is creating an ending? An activity. So, creating an ending. So, let's say for example, Ma'am Angelica, as
di mo kilala pa lang
as
school
Mama
mo.
Angelica is telling a story, and as she tells, she stopped and asked her students to add or to create their own ending. So that's an activity that the teacher would conduct in the classroom to achieve the specific purpose of the language-based approach, which is the proficiency and the proficiency of the English language, maybe as a foreign language or a second language. And second would be the jumble sentence, the most common. So we have, let's say for example, Sir Ashley would conduct this activity. So Sir Ashley would make an activity that where the learners have to arrange the jumbled sentences that he made. So that's all for the language-based approach. So again, language-based approach is student-centered. So in terms of the interest, the enjoyment of the literature, and so language-based approach is equal to interest. And when we say when there is
Grabe naman binulsa mo.
literature, there is the product of very good learning. So that's all. I want you to remember that LBA is equal to interest and equal result to learning. Alright, so for the next approach, may I introduce you Miss or Teacher Angelique to discuss the paraphrasing approach in teaching literature. So Teacher Angelique.
Thank you so much for Sam. How is everyone? Are you guys okay?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. So before we delve deeper into the paraphrastic approach, we will going to define or dissect these words first. Okay? So can anyone tell me what's the meaning of para? Someone say para on the Para means
Stop.
similar. Okay, thank you so much, Miss Damayan. When we say para, it means similar. Similar, okay.
Similar.
How about phrase? Can I call him Mr. Boyd?
It is a small group of words it's forming a sample unit to which is considered as a clause.
Very good. Thank you so much for that. Okay. So we actually we have variety. We have different types of phrases. And in that sense, we also have the it or it's a suffix, which means pertaining to a phrase. Okay. Very good. Let's move on to the next slide.
Ganda ng sulat, pare.
Alright, by the way, before we delve deeper into that, we have four. We have to remember these four. We have to remember these four concepts. Okay, according to Talib, it is to ease students' understanding. Alright, so that is the basic. That is the purpose of this approach. You're not just basically providing a lot of words or sentences to the students. However, you're actually trying to improve their degree of understanding so that they could understand the meaning of the text. Okay. Number two is Rossley. So according to Rossley, it is the use of similar words and sentence structures. All right. So instead of using, let's say, highfalutin words or words that are so difficult to decipher, paraphrasing helps the students or the readers as well as the teachers to fully understand the meaning of the text. Alright, quite similar. Number three is MB and WANK. It deals, according to them, it deals with the surface meaning of the text. So basically, it's the external, the outer. Alright. So you could easily understand, or you could easily comprehend the meaning of the text using variety of sources such as dictionary or your phones, which are very accessible. And lastly, according to the SAR, it's rewriting the text to simpler language. I know all of us, or most of us, are actually trying to rewrite. We try to rewrite a certain concept or key concepts so that we can understand those words in a simple way or in a simple manner. All right. So let's move on to the steps. So there are 4 steps that we could use in order for us to fully understand or utilize this approach. The first would be is read. Okay, who loves to read here? Who loves to read, guys? Let's be honest. Who loves reading? Alright, thank you. And so in order for you to paraphrase or use this approach, you have to read the word, or let's
let's say, the text several times, alright? Because if there are some words that are so hard to understand, you have to read several times so that we can fully understand it, right?
Alright.
Who does that?
Yes.
Do you read the text several times so that you can fully understand it?
Yes.
Okay. So the second one would be you have to note down. So noting down or jotting down notes, key concepts is very helpful, especially if those words are complex. Okay? If they're unfamiliar, alright? So noting down is very essential as well. The third would be is rewriting. So you have, this is actually time consuming, but you need to rewrite your own version or your paraphrase sentences so that you can actually compare. Number 4. You can compare whether you're simply paraphrasing or you're plagiarizing a text. Alright? So let's move on with, of course, we have the advantages. Alright? I'm going to show you guys some text because I know that there's so many texts already. But can anyone tell me what can you see on this picture? An idea, very good. Okay, so once you try this
Very
paraphrastic
nice.
approach, it gives you an idea, right? This aha moment, right? So, so this is what it means, alright? But you're not just basically like, this idea does not pop up into your head, but you have to look for a variety of resources. You can use your cellular phone, you can use your dictionary to look for the meaning of those words. You can look for synonyms, right? So number 2 would be, alright, so for our advantage, second advantage, can anyone tell me what connect. Okay, that is number 2, alright? So you can easily connect, you can easily understand, when you understand the meaning of the text, alright? You can connect not to anyone, alright? You connect to the piece of literature. Isn't it that when you're reading, when you find something unfamiliar, you're like lost, right? You don't know what's going on already. So what you need to do is you have to connect this piece of literature, and in that sense, you have to look for those words so that you can fully understand, right? The third one would be
Read.
okay. Read together. Okay, very good.
Good.
So when you, very similar to the second one, when you actually connect. Alright, so it's not only that you connect with the literature, you also connect, you try to formulate some ideas as well from other people, isn't it? And the last would be, you guys have any idea what this picture is?
Progress.
Progress, okay, very good. So in relation to that, not every one of us are, we also experience being a beginner, alright? So one of the advantages of paraphrastic approach is that it is actually good for beginners. You might not consider yourself as beginners, but what if you try to, let's say, teach? You already have your own career, you're starting teaching already. Some of your students are actually beginners, right? So this approach could be very helpful for your future students so that when they apply it, they can this will help them to grasp, to have a better understanding on the text, right? So, opposite, which we have the disadvantages, alright? So one of the major advantages of paraphrastic approach is, Ms. Teresa? Yes. What do you think is your trying to tell us? Okay. No time. Alright, so this is very time
Ikot niya ate.
consuming. As I have discussed a while ago for
Lambot ng
our
boses
four
ko.
steps of the paraphrastic approach, it
Hindi ako
takes
mapapagod
time,
makinig dito.
alright? You're not just reading the story or the text several times, as well as you're actually jotting down notes, you're trying to do it by yourself, you're using your own words to construct a better sentence. Okay? Next would be yes, ma'am. What do you think is the other disadvantages of paraphrastic approach?
Confused.
Yes. Anything I could answer already? Thank you. So there are some words that are very unfamiliar, right? Okay. In that sense, our vocabularies might be very limited. Alright? So we might use the same words all over again. Okay? Because that is the only thing that we're using. Alright? And the last would be our case.
Yes, sir.
Can someone read it? Or can everyone read it?
Yeah.
We did,
Everyone read it? One.
1, 2, 3, go.
The man himself
That is
stood taller than 5, 6 inches tall. But in the realm of American literature, William Faulkner is the giant.
So, can someone paraphrase this text or sentence?
It's really winter.
Yes.
Paraphrase.
Yes.
In realm of American literature, William Faulkner is a giant. The man himself never stood taller than 5'6" inches tall. Yan po. Paraphrase.
Hindi, hindi.
Alright. So let's make it more simple. Alright. I just need to. Okay.
Ma'am, I think Miss Pamela.
Oh, okay. So alright.
So, William Faulkner is short because he is only 5'6" tall. But in the realm of American literature, he is a giant in the sense that he already had a big
He's a well-known author.
He is successful. Okay, very good. He's successful. He is a major or well-known author. Alright. So that makes him a giant. Alright. Okay. So thank you so much for listening. So I'll give this word to Miss. So let's discuss it more.
Excuse me, teacher, I have a question. What's the opposite of paraphrasing? Because if we talk here about paraphrasing a while back, what is its opposite? So that, me and my classmates would
Me and my
better
compadres.
understand classic,
Yeah. What's up, ma'am?
because you were asking us to paraphrase, right? And you look at the answer of one of your students as opposed to the answer of the other one. There's a very big difference between the two, right?
Yes.
Could it be that your students do not really know what paraphrase means, right?
Yes.
What does it mean? That's a very basic thing that you have to know as an English teacher, that we have to teach our students.
Basically, for the opposite of the word paraphrasing, I agree that it's somewhere plagiarizing. Plagiarizing.
You were about to say something prior to plagiarizing. What was it?
Summarize.
I heard it.
Summarizing.
Yes. That's the opposite of paraphrasing. Right? You have to put that. Because when Calvin gave an answer a while ago, you could have followed it up by saying that when we paraphrase, I have to correct that. Kaya na, yun natin sa inang medal. Ngayon lang, because that's a very important concept. Okay? Continue.
Itong ginawa ng sa
Hey
selection.
everyone, so before I start my discussion, let me first give you guys a simple question. Do not worry, this question doesn't have a wrong or right answer, so I will just call whoever would volunteer, but if there are no volunteers, then I will choose someone. Okay, so imagine you are in a situation wherein this is you, alright? And you have your husband, your wife, and your
Ito
husband
na
or
rin
your
sa
wife
dilemma
is
eh.
about to die. But you know that there is this certain drug that can help you save your husband or your wife. Huh? Hello? Okay, let me repeat that. So, for example, you are in a situation where your husband or your wife is about to die. But there is this one drug that can help your husband or your wife. And you know that this drug is already very expensive. You ask the doctor, how much is it? We charge you 10 times more than the original price. So for example, the drug costs only 1 million pesos. But they charge you for 10 million pesos. So you did everything you could to borrow money, but all you can gain is 5 million. You she tried to bargain to the doctor that they said no. So there is no other chance other than to steal the drug. What would you do? Would you steal the drug but you would go to jail? Or would you not steal the drug but your spouse will die? Anyone?
Dilemma.
It's not an easy. What's your answer? I would steal the drug. You would steal the drug. Why? I do anything for the person. Winston.
I think for me it depends on the situation.
Andun na yung situation.
I will not steal the drug
I'd
because
rather
I'd rather
Hindi man mo.
no I
I will choose my wife to die and I look for a man.
I
And marry another girl.
no
You're
no
gonna marry another girl.
na I will follow the 10 commandments.
Example that I gave a while ago is what we call Heinz dilemma. So in Heinz dilemma, according to this philosophy, the greatest form of human morality is when the person chose to steal the drug, not because it's his or her husband, but because life is much more important than law itself. So there are actually a lot of debates when it comes to this philosophy. But that is not what we are trying to talk about today. What we are trying to focus on is what I just did a while ago, and that is what we call moral or philosophical approach. So moral or philosophical approach discovers the moral values and aims to dig deeper. You want to read beyond what is being read. So how do you do that? Then you ask questions instead of accepting things the way it seems. So why should teachers use this approach? First of all, not only would you help yourselves, but you would also help your students understand themselves and the world around them. You would also help them figure out how other people think. Now, there are a lot of researchers that says that literatures that are ethically sound, they are praised. But literatures that misguides or corrupt, they are condemned. Which makes sense, because if I would give you a literature that is convincing you that sexual harassment is okay, obviously that literature will be condemned. But what if you are faced with evils? That is when the moral or philosophical approach now focuses on reflecting and talking about challenging moral issues. Remember, in life, especially when it comes to morality or ethics, sometimes there's not always an obvious answer of what is wrong and what is right. Sometimes there's not even an answer to what is wrong and what is right. So, for example, the Heinz dilemma, either you steal or you kill. Which one's your decision? Some people would weigh out which one's the greater evil or which one's the greater good. But there are some parts wherein both points are very valid. For example, sex education. Some people say that giving out condoms to teenagers are bad because you are encouraging them to have sex. Some people say that giving out condoms to teenagers is good because you are encouraging them to use protection. Both points are very valid, and that actually happens a lot when it comes to moral or philosophical approach. Either way, we know that moral or philosophical approach will help your students not only understand the literature itself, but also the world around them. And it also helps them improve their critical thinking skills. They will start to think, are my ideas right or wrong? If there is no wrong or right, then what should I believe on? If this is what I believe on, why do I believe in it? And if this is what
I believe
on, how will I explain my own beliefs? So next we have questions to answer whenever you are going to use moral or philosophical approach. Remember guys, these are only guide questions that you can use. So you can still add or so you can still add or you can lessen the question depending on the situation or depending on the literature itself. So first thing that you need to do is you need to let your students analyze what the literature contains, how would you be beyond what is being read if you don't even know what the literature contains? Second that you need to do is you need to find out what are the ideas and how strong they gave those ideas. So if you're saying that I should steal the drug, how strongly are you trying to convince me on those ideas? Second, application. How do the characters in the situation apply these ideas? If it's an informational book, then how can you apply the ideas in real life situations? And lastly, how can you evaluate the literature intellectually? How about morally? So when you evaluate intellectually, you're saying that stealing is wrong according to the law. But when you will evaluate morally, you will see that human life is much more valuable than law itself. So that is what moral or philosophical approach is all about. Next.
Thank you. You know.
Everyone, so my name is Teacher Rod. You can just call me Rod. So welcome to Stylistic Approach. So this stylistic approach, let's get started without further ado. Study various perspectives and analyzes features of literary language. So in this type of stylistic approach, we have the word itself, perspectives. So it is a person's distinctive style or perspective. In a very good example, you students yourselves are authors. So we're making meaning of story. Generally, stylistic approach is making meaning out of the context. So basically, what I'm trying to say, since you yourselves can be authors in the future, we use different styles of approaches. We can use figures of speech in making our styles. So we use similes, we use metaphors, we use different styles in making our poems or different literary works. Do you understand?
Yes. Sorry.
So, moving on, look at different statistic dimensions and how meanings are made. So, kanina, sinabi ko, these are the grammars, or this is the use of figures of speech. In grammars, we have our more grounding, in making sentences in our literary poems. We use repetitions, and examples of those repetitions is the word twist. Sometimes we use twist as, in repetitions. If you twist my trust, I will twist your love. We use repetitions of the word to make meanings. So, and the focus is on the style markers used by the authors in the words. The style markers are actually what I said na. These are actually the grammars. These are actually the styles or the different uniqueness of how authors write their own poems. Those are the styles. Figures of speech, similes, metaphors, onomatopoeia, and anything else. Yes?
Yes, sir. Ano parang nag-bubis na ito ko dito?
So these are the main aspects of statistics. These are just general overview. So meaning this is only the face of statistics. So general statistics, varieties of language. We're talking about general. These are the different types of practical styles. These are the speeches, public speeches, news reports, and other practical practices. And in other regions, general overview, British English style, we have Roman style, and for the next one is literary stylistics. So literary stylistics study about literary genres. So these are poems, this is a literary work, short stories, non-fiction, fiction, and literature. our last and our third stylistic aspect is the theoretical stylistic. So in our theoretical statistics, these are the theories or the origins. Saan po galing ang tayo, saan po galing ng other forms. These are the trend now since stylistic approach is modern and historical developments.
Wait a minute. What did you say? Statistics approach is modern. Did I hear it right?
I was reading, I think it was more on modern times since it was ang nabasa ko po. Hindi kaya ako.
Yeah, but you read that in the end.
Yes.
Yeah, I went to disagree, okay? Because statistics is as old as it could get. It is based on the works of Aristotle and Plato, and the reason why it's called stylistics is because it was taken from the term stylus, which was used in the ancient time. Okay? That's are you referring to the stylus now that we are using? No, I am referring to the stylus in the olden times. Similar to that of a material that could be used in writing. Okay, never mind. That's the difficulty of not really sourcing out books, right? Because if I don't have anything against the internet. In fact, that's heaven sent for me, right? However, it's also very difficult on your part to look for reputable sources. Yes?
Yes, because in a bigger sense, because this approach mainly talks about linguistics.
Okay. Because, ito kasi Mr. Ron Tyler, yaman din naman at nandiyan. Okay? In as much as you are there already, let's talk about statistics, being an English major. Ladies and gentlemen, there is such a thing as stylistics. It's a branch actually of writing in English language. When you talk about stylistics, language and literature are intertwined, yes, in stylistics. Because this is the point of stylistics. All stylistics contain language. How could you, what do you call this? How could you study style if you don't study the language, right? And how could you study literature if you don't have words for it? Unless you have a literature, one that would make use of sign language. Is there a literature that would make use of sign language? Maybe there is. Those for special education. But in as much as our literature is concerned, we always have language. There is always a great debate. Okay? Where does stylistics really fall? Is it in linguistics or is it in literature? And most theorists would say that both, of course, because they go about together. But if you're really going to ask me what stylistics is, take it from the word itself, style. Style of who? The author's style. Every writer has a style. For example, when I check your essays, this Mr. Pagayaw has a style. For example, Miss Natalie has a style. Calvin has a style. Mr. Elisan has a style. And sometimes when I check your essays, because it's in canvas, correct? So I cannot really see the handwriting. The way you write on the board is a style. Yes? Have you seen your classmates write a while ago?
Yes.
Okay, when you get the post-con later on, nakatawa kayo because even the handwriting is there. Okay? So here, every writer has a style. Okay? So when you see a piece of literature, according to stylistics, that speaks about the author's style. Okay? Give me one style of poetry you are familiar with that has been written with a particular style. Arrangement of words, how it looks like, colors, and so forth and so on. Are you familiar with any type sa poetry to maganda? Okay? tree, for example. So I'll write about a hat. Okay, I'll give a poem about a hat in the shape, written in the shape of a hat. Is that stylistics? Yes. Bakit si Ernest Hemingway makes use of green ink whenever he writes? That's his style. How come E.E. Cummings, for example, would write his name like this? Ganyan siya magsulat ng name. Pangalan niya yan. What did you notice? Small letter, small letter, small letter. That's his style. Okay? How come Miss Visconti is fond of colors? That's my style. Have you noticed that, diba? Ha? Gusto ko kinukulay. Okay? You're nice. Okay? Ayaw ko sana i-explain this. Ayaw ko hindi lang ang
analysis to help better understand the text you are reading. So the different levels of comprehension can be experienced by creating a question for you to respond to or to think at the various levels. So this is like giving yourself a quiz question to see if you maybe remember or understand the information of whatever you were trying to learn. Or maybe to check your understanding beyond memorizing. Or maybe to see if you are able to obtain the deeper levels of understanding to go beyond the text and to think outside of the box. So there were 4 levels of comprehension questions. So the first one is the literal, second one is the inferential, the third one is the evaluative, and the last one we have here appreciative. And these levels will be elaborated more as we go on with our discussions. So for each level, you come up with questions and then more importantly, with well-developed and thoroughly explained responses. Because with these responses, we can step into the text we were reading. Like the more in-depth our questions are or the more detailed our responses will be, the better or the easier to understand a piece of literature. Next slide, please. So now we will move on to the 4 levels of comprehension. The first one we have here, the literal, and as said here in our PowerPoint, it's stated facts and text, the data, the specifics, the dates, the traits, and the settings. So at this level, you now comprehend or maybe recall or maybe even repeat what the text says. So the things that is stated in the text will require the readers to identify or maybe recall the relevant information explicitly. So meaning explicitly, it is clear and in a detailed manner. Like it leaves no room for confusion or doubts. Confusion or doubts. Okay? So the readers may now be identifying some statements or maybe sentences that indicates the main idea of the selection, or maybe they are identifying directly the fact, or maybe the opinion of the selection, or maybe they are identifying some keywords or some phrases or sentences that explicitly states the important information. So for example, in our literal level of comprehension, we can use a very simple very simple mini story like Mary gave a patient in Ward 8 an injection of a strong pain medication. mini story is, what did Mary do? So anyone in class who can give me a literal response in accordance to our mini story?
Maybe a patient in a ward 8.
Yes, that is right. So we can just simply answer, she gave a patient an injection. Another literal question we can come up with based on our mini story is, what was in the injection? What was in the injection?
Strong pain.
Yes, we can answer that the injection was of a strong pain medication. So we can see here that the literal responses is found directly in the text. They are explicitly stated in the text. Am I clear about the literal level of comprehension? If that's the case, let's move on to the next level, which is the inferential. And as I said here, it builds on facts in text, predictions using facts from text, sequence, traits, and settings. So in this level, we can now explain what the text means. So the meaning of the text is drawn from our literal stated ideas. So in these simple terms, we may now make questions. We now write questions and answers that requires the reader to make an educated guess or predictions about what will happen in the story. So for example, let's use again this mini story that is written in the board. So an example of an inferential question we can come up with in relation to this story is, what was Mary's job? Anyone in class who can give me an inferential response to our inferential questions? Yes, we can answer here that she is a nurse or a doctor because Mary gave a medicated injection to a patient and she was in ward with this patient. So another question we can come up with in accordance to our mini story is, what was wrong with the patient? So anyone in class who can answer this inferential question? Yes. Or we can just say that the patient was in pain because the patient was given a strong pain medication and was in a hospital. So we can see or we can observe that our inferential responses uses the information in the text as the clues. And also we use our background knowledge to come up with our answers. And the response or our answers is not directly or it's not explicitly stated in the text. And also we build off what is being implied in the text. Yes, what is being implied in the text to draw the conclusions or to draw our answers. So now let's move on to our next level, which is the evaluative level. Am I correct here? So, as stated here in our PowerPoint, evaluative is the judgment of text based on the fact or opinion, validity, appropriateness, worth, acceptable, desirable ideas, comparison, cause, and effect. So in here, in our evaluative level, this is the level wherein we now understand the information or ideas well enough to analyze or to judge or to critique that specific information or ideas. So in here in evaluative, maybe we can use the literature entitled the three little pigs story. So an evaluative question we can come up with. Are you still listening?
Yes, ma'am.
So questions, we must consider, you must give your own opinion and your own judgment. So maybe half of the class would answer the question yes, and maybe half of the class would answer no. And I know that you have your own reasons about this matter, but you need to support that idea or that opinion in accordance to your ideas in your responses. So lastly, we have the appreciative. So I know this is very familiar to you. So this is the response to text based on personal reaction and reflection. Reflection places relearning story and the author's purpose. So in this level, we now comprehend the author's purpose or the author's point of view or his tone. You know, we may now write questions and answers that requires the reader to make a personal response about a particular literature. Again, we will use this example, the 3 little pigs. So, an appreciative question we can come up with is, what is the author's purpose in creating the story? So, anyone in class who can give me an appreciative response about our appreciative question. So, what is the author's purpose in creating the story? I know this. The 3 little pigs is just familiar to you. Yes. So anyone in class who can give me an appreciative response to our appreciative question? Okay, and so maybe we can say, or we can answer here, that the author's purpose is to show the readers that hard work brings positive outcomes. You know the pigs that use bricks in creating his home ended up being safe from danger.
Okay.
So another we can come up with why did the author include the other informations about maybe about on what each of the pigs used in their home. Maybe the author wanted to show the readers that the pigs that did not took his time or did not took their time to pick the right materials in creating their home had negative outcomes. So that's all for the levels of comprehension. And any questions from the class? If that's the case, may I call teacher Christine?
Okay guys, for the other topic, kasi meron kami last topic. So, we asked for permission from Alma. Sabi niya, we are going to take 10 minutes for tomorrow. 10 minutes or less than 10 minutes. Para dun sa natitirang isang topic and then the activity.
Okay, you listen to me. In as much as I do not want them to continue anymore, like 1 hour is an hour. That part I should say is a bit important. It has something to do with assessment, right? So we really have to listen to it. For the next groups 3 and 4, okay? If we could start earlier tomorrow instead of 1:30, can we start 1:50? Is that okay with you?
Yes.
No? Bakit? No? Bakit no?
Instead of 1:30, so that we could accommodate this group.
Okay.
Pwede ba yun?
Yes.
Yes. You'll start early. Anyway, it will not be group 3 who's going to start. We will start with group 2. They will just continue. Okay? And then, what is their assignment? Do they have paper? Ganito na lang sila siya. Give the assignment, the activity tomorrow, because it's also very unfair. Because there might be something there about your topic tomorrow, right?
Yeah.
I have an assignment. Instead, ako magbibigay ng
Stop po diba?
assignment. You summer of our group.
Okay, so I will be talking about the different
Give me a
assessment.
minute. Isang ratio.
And one recall what my other co-teachers have discussed yesterday. What are the different literary approaches used in this literature? Can anyone please
Mom, one is language-based approach.
Okay, thank you. Now, George, and then you want to give third language?
Paraphrastic approach.
Thank you.
Paraphrastic.
Ma'am, Miss Eliza, raising your hand. There are still two different approaches. Okay, Miss Eliza. Okay, very good. And the moral philosophical. Okay, very good. So that are the different literary approaches used in the literature. So now that you have already have a knowledge about the different literary approaches used in teaching literature, let us now move on with the different assessment strategies used in teaching literature. So the first before we start with the different examples of assessment strategies, let me first define what assessment strategies is. So in the class, can anyone give me the definition of what assessment strategies is? Do you have any idea what assessment strategies is? This is commonly used in the classroom by the teacher to assess their students. Can anyone give me any example of assessment strategies used inside of the class? Anyone?
Quizzes.
Yes, very good. Quizzes is one assessment strategies or tools that is being used by teachers to assess whether their students have comprehensively understand the topic. Okay, so let me define what assessment strategies are. So assessment strategies are methods used by the teacher in assessing the progress inside of the classroom. It helps the teacher to evaluate whether the learning is effective and whether the students are ready to move forward with a higher level of study. It is a very crucial part of education. Why? Because it helps the teacher to determine whether the curriculum or the aim of the education is met or not. So now that we have already defined what assessment strategies is, let us now move forward with its different examples. Okay, so the first example is known as the KWL chart. So the KWL chart is a 3-column graphic organizer.
Excuse me, why are your lines on the blackboard like that? Can you make that better? Sorry, ma'am. Okay, again. I know you are in a hurry, but
Yes, ma'am.
sorry about that. Very good. That's it.
Okay, so KWL chart is a 3-column graphic organizer. So in the first column is where we will write the K, the second column is where W is, and in the third column is where the L is. So I know you are wondering what KW stands for. So KW is an acronym for no. No. W is for, can anyone guess what W is? 1. Okay, very good, Mr. Limit. And for the L, can anyone guess what L is? Learn. So it is an acronym for what students already know about the lesson, and what students want to know about the lesson, and what students have ultimately learned from the lesson. So how does the KWL chart work? So the KWL chart works inside the classroom. First things first is, of course, the teacher will give the objective of the lesson. And after giving the objective of the lesson, the teacher will ask the students. So students, what are the terms and vocabularies that you can associate with my given objective or the given lesson? The teacher will ask that, and the teacher will ask the students to write everything they can associate with the lesson. This is done until the students run out of ideas. And before starting the lesson, the teacher would also ask the students, so from a given objective, what do you want to learn from our lesson today? And the students will write everything that they want to learn from the W column. And after the lesson is given, the teacher will now ask the students to write everything that the students have learned from the lesson. And then the students will compare and contrast the W column and the L column and see whether the learning want of the students is met or not. So why is KWL effective? KWL effective. It is because KWL elicits prior knowledge from our students. It also gives a purpose of the lesson. Another is in the learn, wherein students can monitor what they have comprehended and learned from the given lesson.
Okay, excuse me again, Mr. Fresh, because you already made mention of it. You made mention of prior knowledge, right? Okay, so when you speak about prior knowledge and you're talking about literature or any other skill in the English language or even in Filipino language, okay, it is related to, you write it already, I will not let you guess anymore, we do not have the grandeur of time, right? So you call that you are trying to access your schema. You call it schema theory. Please remember that because we are English majors, right? Schema theory is very important. Can you write the word schema theory on the blackboard, please? You are trying to access your schema. You are going to use this in your research papers. You might want to take a look at this particular theory, a schema theory. Oops. Spelling of theory.
Sorry.
It's okay. There we go. She's trying her best to do the cursive.
Schema theory. So class, please remember what schema theory is.
Schema theory is when you access your prior knowledge. In English, that's very popular. Every time you learn a different language, you always access your prior knowledge. Let's move on to the next.
Okay, let us now move on with the next example, which is the literature circle, which is also aligned with jigsaw. So let me just give a generalization between the two. So the literature circle and jigsaw composed of small groups containing 3 to 5 students. So in this, students are grouped into small groups and the teacher could give different instructions to different students.
Wait a minute, where are you? Jigsaw?
Yes, ma'am. Jigsaw and literature circle and jigsaw, ma'am. Because they are alike, ma'am. So I will just give the generalization between them.
If they are alike, then why don't you just give us the differences?
Okay, so jigsaw is a great opportunity for students to be expert in a particular terms in literature or inside the class. It is also a brainstorming, just like literature circle, wherein students are grouped into small groups, wherein they will brainstorm and discuss about a particular literature.
Wait a minute. You're not eating what those strategies are.
Okay, let me just explain them one by one.
Yes.
Okay, so
Because
literature.
ganito yan, ayun ang Mr. Pressure, why I am pointing that out to you because you showed it to your students. That's your obligation. Whatever you show your students, you have to discuss it. Okay, come on.
So literature circle is a small group. Your concept is very simple because it only contains a small group of students, where students discuss particular topics inside the literature, where the teacher could instruct students different instructions. Just like, for example, the teacher group the students in different groups. And group A will be assigned to discuss the different themes used in the literature, and group B is assigned to discuss the different characters in the literature, and group C is assigned to discuss the different symbolism used in the literature.
Is that all?
But after that, the students will
Report.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, and then after that, are those the only parts? Kasi what you are mentioning there in front might fall under other strategies of assessment. What makes literature circles really literature circles?
Ma'am, because it only contains a small group of students wherein they will form a circle, and each students are given the opportunity to
Well, I can do that too in brainstorming, right? Usually when you brainstorm, you don't form a straight line for the group, right? You always form a circle. What makes it literary circle is what? Never came across it? Okay, maybe you have done it when you were in high school. This is how a literature circle looks like. Okay, we divide the class, just like what you said, into 7 groups. For example, okay, one group discusses the characters, themes, just like what you made mention, symbols, and all. But there will always be a group that needs to discuss number 1. Okay, they have to discuss, let's say for example, they are the enlightener of the story, right? So what are they going to do? They will enlighten us. They're going to give us a lesson or the moral of the story. There is a summarizer. Di ba may mga parts yan? That's the reason why it differs from all other strategies. Okay, so sometimes what teachers would do is they would divide the class into 3, and then within the 3 groups, all parts are already there. You have the literary, they give different things. Like let's say for example, literary word builder. Anong trabaho ng literary word builder? They unlock the difficulties in the story or in the piece of literature. Ganun yan, okay? Kaya siya naiiba from brainstorming. Kasi the reason why I want to correct you there is because it's already a strategy. And then you can grade them. Halimbawa, lahat ng literary vocabulary builders for the 4 groups stay in front. Okay, so nakaupo sila lahat. Okay, discussion number 1, and then she discusses, these are the words that are difficult to discussion number 2, 3, and 4. And then the teacher could rate it according to the different parts.
Thank you very much.
Yes, okay. So, kailangan alam niyo yan kasi that's very common. Okay, ano next?
So,
ano yung jigsaw?
Yes. So, next is jigsaw, which is also brainstorming as a group that contains 3 to 5 students. So, in jigsaw, yung pagkakaiba lang ng jigsaw sa literature circle is that students are given a chance to become an expert.
Please do not get me wrong. Why do you have a cell phone in front? Is that a part of your...
sorry.
That's not allowed when I teach.
So jigsaw, students are given a chance to become an expert of their topic. So parang siyang review where students, parang teachers will ask students and students will answer.
Bakit jigsaw?
But because we have to brainstorm with students on particular specific topics from the literature, and the students are given a chance to review mga pag-aralan nila.
I think we have a different connotation of jigsaw. Kasi diba, ang jigsaw is usually used for literature, and this is how it looks like. I do not know for your source, pero this is how it looks like. Okay, here inside the classroom, let's discuss, for example, dead stops. Okay, one part will be given to that particular part, and then here, and then here, and then there. Okay, and then from there you derive, depende sa gusto ng teacher, you derive the summary and the characters. And then we piece it together, kaya nga siya jigsaw. Parang puzzle, you piece it all together. Diba? Meron siya dapat, continuity. That's how it looks like.
Thank you, ma'am. So from the definition given by ma'am, it is like a puzzle wherein students will derive, and from that, it helps students to become very expert on.
That's the objective of a jigsaw. Okay. Tapos opposite, you can always modify the jigsaw. You could ask them to evaluate yung prior na part ng puzzle nila. Kunwari, yung group nila Jake ang nagsasalita, di ba? They could evaluate. And then from there, continue their task. Fit in everything. Anong next?
Next is visualization. So visualization is a very important aspect for a literature class. Why? Because it develops and improves our creativity and creative thinking. So in visualization, activities can be when a teacher asks students to draw a particular scenario in a literature. And if the students will present the scenario and give what is the reason why the students draw this particular image and what is the importance of that scenario to her life or his life.
Okay.
Visualization can also be done through creative writing, where students write a poem or students write a continuation story of a given particular literature.
Okay. Correction ulit I'm sorry. This is what you are really going to use inside the classroom, so I have to provide the feedback. But when you ask your students to visualize, your example kasi is, what is the, you draw a scenario, you said? I think it does not tickle the higher order thinking skills of your students. Di ba? Parang hindi siya pang-hats. Ang objective ng literature is not, I know, one of the best ways by which you could really teach literature is via enjoyment. Okay, fine. I don't have anything against that. I like that, in fact. Pero, if you could hit more than 2 birds with just 1 stone, then why not do it, right? So maybe a very good question for you is, okay, sige, Dead Stars na lang kasi yun ang medyo natin, we are very familiar with Dead Stars. Maybe you could ask them to draw, okay, whatever happened to Alfredo Salazar. Why is it, and then jive it with the word Dead Stars. Yung ganun, di ba? Why don't we go beyond what the students know? Do you remember, I think I mentioned to you of I+1 when we were doing our online classes, di ba? Yung I+1, input +1, dapat pala yun. Hindi yung hanggang dito lang mo, pang grade nila, ay hindi they for all you know, they may even be more creative than you. Creativity there does not always stand for drawing only, What else? Kasi ang thinking natin basta creativity, nag-drawing. DIOB, nag-drawing. That's not creativity. What is it?
Well, maybe, for example, as a teacher, I could ask Miss Celestia to write something about her name, kung paano na-derive yung name niya. For example, yung alamat ng name niya. For example, she would create an alamat about her name. Then her Pina is Pina, right? Alamat of Pina. And Celestia, I was asking, Celestia, could you write an alamat about how your parents got your name?
Tapos, kung gusto mo, talaga kasi I like creativity in terms of visual drawing talaga. O kasi may background drawing siya of that particular alamat. Why not? Tama? Yes. I like that. Okay, we go to the next.
Okay, next is the debate. So in debate, a teacher or students could use a non-fiction or fiction literary work wherein they can find an issue which they can debate on. So debate.
You create an issue based from Dead Stars now on the spot that we could debate on. This is pro, the other one is anti. Ano ang
Can I relate na lang sa favorite ko na?
Sa?
The literature, one of my favorite literature.
What is it?
It is called All the Bright Places.
Wait kasi, ganito kasi yan, You know the reason why I am pegging it sa my Dead Stars? Because all students know it. If you're going to relate that, anong alam namin dyan?
Baka will give a background lang po.
No, I know, we don't have the grandeur of time. That's why, let's do away with whatever we have. Ibahin mo, the necklace. Everyone knows the necklace. What about the necklace? What could be a very good issue to debate on?
Mahal ko.
Huh? Oh, who could give me a very good topic to yes, please?
Materialism, ma'am.
Again?
Materialism.
Exactly. Okay, for example, to borrow or not to borrow. Diba? Sabi nila, you want trouble, you borrow money. Borrow money, then trouble will follow. Is that true or false? So let's debate about that. Okay. So,
So, bibigyan ko lang yung importance ng debate sa debate.
okay.
So, debate helps students to link ideas and words to come up for a more meaningful concept. Katulad na doon sa very start. For example, yun na nag-debate tayo about so ganun pala yun. Makikita natin yung different perspective.
And, okay, ganito yan. I will challenge your material all the more. Okay? You are talking about literary values, di ba? Literary values. Ano yan eh, pang-affective if you're going to ask me in the lesson plan. Okay? What about the language focus, for example, of debate? What does it do to language?
Ma'am, for me, I think most students confidence in speaking, ma'am.
Oh, very good. Okay. Sandali lang. That's for speaking. Pero I'm talking about linguistics.
Vocabulary.
From speaking, ma'am, they can come up with it as they can come across with more vocabularies, ma'am.
Ganyan ang kulay na teacher. Very lang for this yun ang value na linguistics, di ba? Diction, I heard it. Someone was about to say diction kanina. It's choosing the right word at the right place at the right time. Next one.
Okay, so the last one, bibilisan ko na lang because the time is running out.
Sandali, bakit? Anong oras na?
It's already 1:41 mo.
I want 41. Okay. Hindi, huwag ka mag-alala. They will understand. Kasi that is very important.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay.
The next, okay. So the last is literary response or creative writing. So literary response is where yung pinaka-basic na question in literary response is, what did you find the most interesting in the literature? So literary response, it could be done through creative writing, poster making, poem writing, as long as yung mga ginagawa ng students na activity na yun, it communicates information that is part of the literature discourse.
And it has to be done very creatively. Okay, see your lesson. Finish your lesson.
So this is all the assessment strategies. So assessment strategies is very important because it helps the teacher to determine whether the students are ready na ba sila mag-move forward to the higher level of study. So, is there any question about assessment strategies?
I'm pretty sure if they do, they could place it in our GC.
Yes.
Okay.
Okay, class. So, assessment strategy. I will now use assessment strategy to evaluate whether you have really comprehended what I have discussed and what my co-teachers have discussed yesterday. I will be distributing an answer sheet. So this assessment strategy is known as quizzes. It is a very common assessment strategy used in every classroom. So please.
Well, what type of quiz dapat sabihin mo sa akin?
The type of quiz is multiple choices and a true or false activity. Okay. I will now distribute this and the due date of this will be tomorrow. Thank you class very much.
Tomorrow is Sunday. Give it on Monday.
Sorry, on Monday.
Yes.
Please submit it on us on Monday.
And we're doing it on Monday. Okay? What about my assignment? Where are my handwritings?
Way back.